The mysterious escape. The night sky was heavy with silver clouds drifting over the alien moon. The air carried a strange hum from glowing insects swirling through the tall grass near the colony walls. Mark stood by the fence, staring into the shadows beyond the floodlights. His chest tightened as though the wilderness itself whispered his name, daring him to step past the gates. Most settlers feared the wild, but tonight something different pulled at him. Then he saw her, small and slender with markings that shimmered like starlight across her skin. She moved fast, like a shadow gliding along the wall. Her head turned once, her glowing eyes sharp. Then she slipped through a broken gap in the fence, vanishing into the dark. Mark froze, his pulse hammering in his ears. She was not human. She was one of the native girls whispered about in hushed voices, secretive, dangerous, untouchable. Yet he had never believed the rumors until now. Something about her movement pulled him forward like a hook in his chest. Why would an alien girl risk the wild at night? What truth was she hiding? He knew the rules. No settler was allowed beyond the colony walls after dark. But his body betrayed him, and his boots carried him through the same gap in the fence. His heart raced as he followed her into the unknown. The air outside was alive with the scent of damp earth and glowing flowers. His steps sank into soft soil as the sound of the colony faded behind him, replaced by the cries of unseen beasts. Ahead, the figure slipped between twisted trees with glass-like leaves. She moved with grace, as if the forest itself welcomed her, while he stumbled clumsy and desperate to stay silent. His throat dried with every breath. His mind screamed at him to turn back, but the shimmer of her skin haunted him. The way her eyes had searched the shadows burned into his thoughts. He pushed forward, needing to know. The forest lit itself in strange colors. Mushrooms throbbed with blue light, vines burned red, and the trees whispered when the wind brushed their branches. It felt like voices almost human, but not. Mark shivered, as if he had stepped into a place forbidden to men. A branch snapped under his boot and panic ripped through him. He pressed against a tree, his breath shallow, praying she had not heard. She stopped. Her glowing eyes swept the dark like lanterns searching for prey. Every second stretched forever, and Mark felt the weight of the silence crushing him. At last she turned and walked deeper into the wild. The path twisted and the land grew stranger. Silver pools gleamed under the moon, and tall flowers bent toward her as though greeting her. She moved like one born of this place, while he felt like a trespasser clinging to ground that wanted him gone. Still he followed his heart, pounding with fear and something hotter, something nameless. They reached a clearing glowing gold under the pale moon. She stepped inside, her body trembling as though the place held her deepest secret. Mark crouched low behind the roots, every nerve burning. She knelt in the golden light, her head bowed, her hands shaking, and for the first time she looked fragile. Not a threat, not a ghost, but broken. Mark's chest ached, torn between staying hidden and stepping out. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. She pressed her hands against the soil, whispering in her tongue. The sound was soft and sharp with sorrow, like a prayer carved in pain. The clearing itself seemed to glow brighter with her voice, and Mark leaned forward helpless against the pull. Her eyes lifted to the sky, glowing with tears she would not release. Mark's throat tightened as he realized she was not hiding danger but grief. She carried a secret that was crushing her. He wanted to tell her she was not alone, but instinct whispered, "Wait." The moment stretched like a rope about to snap. Sweat slid down his face and his heart thundered each beat, begging for release. He knew she carried something no human had ever seen, and he stood on the edge of a truth that could shatter everything. When she rose, he thought she would return toward the colony, but instead she walked deeper into the glowing field, her steps dragging as though chains bound her ankles. She glanced back once, and Mark dropped low, his breath caught tight. He was certain she had seen him, but she turned away, her shoulders heavy under the weight of an unseen world. Mark pressed his palms against the roots, grounding himself as his curiosity burned hotter than fear. He could not stop. The wild had swallowed him as surely as it held her. The colony was gone. The night was closing in, and in the silence of that alien world, one human had chosen to chase a secret that could change everything. The hidden ritual. Mark moved like a shadow through the trees and glowing vines as the alien girl stepped deeper into the golden clearing. The air grew heavy and warm, filled with the sweet scent of flowers that bloomed only at night. Their petals spread wide, spilling red firelight across the grass until the entire field seemed to burn under the pale moon. Mark's breath caught in his throat. Every step reminded him that this was not a place meant for human eyes. The girl stopped before a tall, smooth stone rising from the center of the clearing. She placed her trembling hands against it, whispering words in her strange tongue. Her voice wavered with sorrow, each syllable breaking from her lips as though it cost her strength to speak. Mark leaned forward, straining to hear his chest tight. She looked so small, then so young, so afraid. Mark crouched lower, guilt gnawing at him, yet curiosity pulling harder. He knew he was trespassing on something sacred, something private, yet the hunger for answers crushed every thought of retreat. Even the forest seemed to bow before her. The trees swayed though no wind stirred their branches, and glowing insects gathered above like silent witnesses to her secret. She lowered herself to the ground, her head bowed, her hands pressed against her knees as though ashamed. The tension inside Mark coiled tighter. Why risk the wild for this ritual? What was she about to reveal? His throat ached with the urge to call out, yet fear pinned him silent. Then it happened. She shifted, and from beneath her body spilled something radiant. Mark's eyes widened, his breath frozen. It was not waste, but living fire. Stones glowing red, blue, and gold fell to the grass, each jewel pulsing with its own light. She squeezed her eyes shut, her face tight with shame as though cursed by the gift she carried. Mark's heart stumbled. He stared at the jewels, stunned, every tale he had heard erased by the truth before him. Her body created jewels, impossible and yet undeniable. His first thought screamed wealth. One stone could buy weapons, ships, even worlds. But another thought followed fast and darker. If anyone discovered this, she would never be free. She would be hunted, chained, drained until nothing remained of her but sorrow. Her trembling hands snatched the jewels one by one, burying them quickly beneath the golden grass. Her glowing eyes darted across the trees in fear. Mark pressed flat against the roots, his pulse so loud he feared she would hear it. For one terrifying moment, her gaze swept across his hiding place, and he swore her eyes met his. But she turned away, still drowning in her own fear. She covered the last jewel, then hugged her knees, her body shaking as tears slid down her cheeks. Guilt sliced through Mark like a blade. This was not a ritual, this was torment. Her gift was her prison, and she bore it alone. His mind begged him to leave, to turn back to the safety of the colony, but his heart refused. Something inside him demanded he protect her, though he had no idea how. The clearing fell into silence. She lifted her face to the moon, her voice breaking into whispers again. The words were foreign, yet heavy like chains. They sounded like a prayer, a plea thrown into the stars, begging for freedom. Then the silence cracked. A sharp snap of branches tore through the night. Mark stiffened, every muscle frozen. The girl's head whipped around, her glowing eyes wide with terror. She rose slowly, scanning the shadows, her body trembling like prey, sensing the hunter. Mark's pulse thundered. Beasts roamed the wild. But this was not the sound of claws or fangs. This was heavier, slower, deliberate. Footsteps hunting. The girl whispered once more, then slipped away from the stone, her body pressed low as she moved to the far edge of the clearing. She did not flee, she hid. Her breaths short, her movements frantic. Shadows twisted between the trees. Harsh guttural voices echoed through the night. Not her language. Strangers. Hunters. Her eyes flickered to the buried jewels, then back to the voices. She trembled against the tree, her fear thick enough to choke the air. Mark felt fire burn through his chest, anger rising sharp and hot. Whoever hunted her carried cruelty, not justice. He wanted to rise to fight to shield her, but he had nothing. No weapon, no plan, only the heat in his blood. The voices grew clearer. The hunters stepped closer, their dark silhouettes breaking against the glow. The girl pressed herself deeper into the shadows, her fear spilling across the clearing like a scream. Mark clenched his fists, his mind a storm. The secret was moments from discovery. He had to choose. Step into the light and stand beside her, or remain hidden and watch her be taken. His choice would carve both their fates. The night pressed heavier, the golden grass shimmering faintly above the hidden jewels. And in that breathless moment, the world itself seemed to wait for Mark's decision. Trust and secrets, the voices in the dark crept closer, and danger pressed heavy on the clearing. The girl clung to the tree, her glowing eyes wide, her breath sharp with fear. Her trembling gave her away the sound of her breathing betraying her hiding place. Mark crouched low in the shadows, his chest pounding. He had no weapon, no plan yet. He knew he could not leave her to face this alone. Then a branch snapped under his boot, loud as thunder. The girl spun toward him, her gaze locking with his. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Her face shifted from terror to shock, then to anger. She hissed sharp words, grabbing a stone, her hand shaking. Mark raised his hands, palms open, his voice low and steady, begging her not to fear him. She froze, her chest rising and falling fast. Her glowing eyes burned into him as though searching his soul. Mark whispered again, telling her he had followed, but not to harm her. He told her he had seen her secret and swore no one would ever know. Her gasp cut through the air. Her hands shook so hard the stone slipped from her grasp. She whispered no again and again, her voice cracking with panic. Mark softened his voice further, his words calm like water. He told her he understood why she hid it. He told her her life mattered more than the jewels. She stared at him through tears trembling in her eyes. She whispered, asking why a human would help her, why he did not see her as treasure to be claimed. Mark shook his head slowly. He told her she was not a prize, not a machine, but someone who deserved freedom. Her lips quivered. She turned her face aside, unable to believe. Yet she did not flee. Instead, she whispered her name, faint as a ghost. She told him her people would kill her if they knew. She told him hunters had chased her since birth, her body cursed to spill jewels, her family hiding her away, but secrets always escaped, and now she was prey. Mark listened, his chest burning with rage. He swore softly he would never betray her. She looked back into his eyes, and for the first time her gaze held not anger, but sorrow and a fragile spark of trust. The hunters drew closer. Torches fell. Ickering between the trees, shadows crawled across the golden grass. The girl pressed back against Mark, her body trembling. She whispered, if they found her, it was the end. Mark whispered back, they would not. He reached for her hand gently. Her skin was warm and trembling. To his surprise, she clung tighter instead of pulling away, as though believing for the first time she was not alone. They crouched together, their hearts pounding as the hunters stepped into the clearing. Faces masked, voices cruel. They called her the jewel bearer, and Mark's stomach twisted at the name. One came close, torchlight grazing over their hiding place. Mark held his breath, certain it was the end. But the man cursed and turned away. The hunters spread across the clearing, kicking at the grass, searching for signs. The girl whispered that if they found the buried jewels, all would be lost. Mark squeezed her hand, whispering to stay calm. She begged him to leave to save himself, but Mark shook his head steady. He whispered that humans do not abandon friends, not even to death. Her eyes widened and tears slipped down her cheeks at his words. Then horror struck. A hunter bent at the very place where the jewels lay. His fingers brushed the grass, and the girl bit her lip, stifling a cry. Mark's muscles coiled, ready to leap, though he knew it meant certain death. But the night split open with a roar. From the shadows charged a beast larger than anything Mark had ever seen. Its hide bristled with spines, its jaws snapping with fury. The hunters shouted, their blades flashing as the monster crashed into them. Mark seized the chance. He pulled the girl to her feet, whispering now. They fled into the dark, their hands locked tight. Behind them, steel-clashed screams tore through the air. The forest blurred around them, glowing vines whipping past. Her breath came fast, her body shaking with terror and relief. Mark guided her through roots and branches, his blood roaring with the need to protect. At last, they collapsed deep within the forest, far from the chaos. The girl pressed against a tree, gasping for air. Mark dropped beside her, whispering they were safe for now. She shook her head, whispering the hunters never stop. They would chase until death. Her voice broke and she hid her face. Mark gently lowered her hands, whispering she was not alone. He promised with his life he would fight to keep her free. Her glowing eyes lifted to his, whispering she could not understand why he cared. He gave her a faint smile, whispering that sometimes humans care not for what someone gives, but for who they are. She blinked at the thought as though it was foreign, then nodded slowly, whispering, "Thank you." Mark leaned back against the tree, his ears sharp to the forest. The night still carried danger, but for the first time he felt purpose. He had stepped beyond the walls out of curiosity, but now it was different. Now it was about her, about protecting her, about proving she was more than treasure. She sat close, her trembling fading her breath. Evening, Mark stayed awake, his eyes fixed on the shadows. The bond between them was fragile but real, a thread of trust spun from fear and sorrow, and that thread gave him strength. Beneath the silver moon, the wild world watched in silence, two souls bound by secrets, trust, and the promise of a fight that was only beginning, the hunt. The forest stretched endless before them, its shadows whispering with every step. Mark kept his stride steady, his ears sharp, his hand gripping the alien girls as they pushed deeper into the wild. The air was thick with moss and glowing flowers, and every sound made her flinch. She whispered that hunters never stopped once they marked prey. Her trembling voice carried a truth that cut straight through him. They crossed a silver stream shining like broken glass under the alien moon. Mark paused, hearing the splash of water, but beneath it came another sound, heavy steps crushing soil close behind. Thus, hunters were near. The girl clutched tighter, whispering they must move. She said there was a place ahead, a place where she had hidden before. The path narrowed, roots clawed up from the ground, and strange eyes blinked in the branches above. Low growls rumbled through the dark, and Mark placed himself between her and the wild, but he knew they could not outrun both beasts of the forest and men drunk on greed. They needed shelter. She pointed to a ridge of black stone rising above the trees. A cave mouth yawned at its base like the jaw of a waiting beast. They hurried, but the forest erupted with noise. The hunters were close, their voices sharp, their torches flaring between the trunks. Mark pushed her forward, whispering to run. Birds scattered in a frenzy, beasts bolted through the brush. Grass shook with the stampede of unseen hooves. She stumbled, but he caught her, pulling her along as the shouts closed in like chains. At last they reached the ridge. The cave loomed black and endless. They rushed inside, swallowed by its cold mouth. Mark guided her deeper until the walls shimmered with blue light. Crystals glowed, casting pale ghosts across their faces. Then Mark froze. The floor glittered like a river of stars, jewels piled high, silent and shining. The girl lowered her head, whispering this was where she had left them when her body gave more than she could bear. She had returned again and again, hiding her cursed burden in the dark. Mark stepped slowly across the cavern. His breath sharp, riches beyond kingdoms lay at their feet. Yet none of it spoke of wealth. It spoke of her suffering. She hugged herself, whispering this was her curse. Her people would never see her as more than treasure. She confessed in broken words that she had once thought of burying herself here so no one could use her again. Her voice cracked and Mark's chest clenched. He whispered fierce that she was wrong. He told her these jewels meant nothing compared to her life. He told her if humans carried such a gift, they would call it wonder, not curse. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but behind them a spark flickered alive. She whispered, "Why he cared, why he risked death for her." Mark answered soft, steady. "Sometimes a man meets someone he cannot walk away from. Sometimes a life is worth more than all the stars." Her trembling eased her shoulders, no longer collapsing under the weight of her secret. For a heartbeat she believed him. Then voices thundered at the cave mouth. Hunters had found them. Torchlight spilled inside, shadows stretching long across the jeweled floor. Mark pulled her close, his jaw locked with resolve. There was nowhere left to run. Their laughter echoed cruel, sharp. They mocked her name. They called her jewel bearer. They promised chains and cages. Mark's rage boiled hot. She whispered for him to leave, to save himself, but he turned fierce eyes upon her. He whispered, "Humans do not abandon those they protect." He swore to stand with her to the very end. She stared stunned, then whispered in her tongue words soft as trust and gratitude. She stood beside him, no longer shaking but ready. The hunters stepped in, their eyes widening at the sight of the jewels. Greed poured from them thick and choking as they spread out, weapons raised. They told her she belonged to them now. Mark stepped forward, his body tense, his voice sharp. He told them she was not theirs. He told them she was free. The hunters sneered, and one raised his weapon. But before steel could fall, the girl lifted her hand and cried out. Her voice shattered the cavern like thunder. Crystals blazed, brighter jewels erupting with firelight. The hunters cursed, stumbling back as the cavern flared with searing glow. The ground trembled under Mark's boots, the air thick with burning light. She turned to him, whispering fast. The jewels carried the energy of the world. She had never used it, never wanted to, but now she must. Mark seized her hand, and together they ran as light flared, blinding. Behind them the hunters staggered, shielding their eyes, shouts breaking through chaos. She led him through a twisting passage, her breath harsh, her steps desperate. At last they broke into a hidden chamber where the cave roof opened to the stars. The girl collapsed to her knees, drained. Mark dropped beside her, whispering. They were safe. She shook her head, her voice raw. The hunters never stop. They will chase until death. She looked at him, her glowing eyes fierce with sorrow, whispering, if he stayed, he would die too. Mark gripped her trembling hands, his voice steady as steel. He told her his choice was already made. Her head bowed, tears falling like jewels upon the stone. For the first time she felt chosen, not for her curse, not for wealth, but for herself. She whispered that maybe her burden had led her to the one soul who could see her as more than treasure. Mark tightened his hold, vowing he would fight as long as he breathed. The final battle was coming, he felt it in his bones, and in that cavern beneath the endless stars their fates had become one. The final choice. The chamber lay silent but for their breath. The girl leaned weakly against the stone wall, her glowing eyes dim in the pale moon pouring through the broken roof. Mark stayed close, gripping a jagged branch as if it were steel, though it was only wood. His heart beat steady but heavy. He knew the truth. The hunters would come. They would never stop until they had her, the girl whispered. She could not run forever. Her voice cracked with sorrow. She said if she gave herself up, maybe they would spare him. Mark shook his head firm, his voice sharp with fire. He told her her life was not something to be traded. He told her she was not a curse, not a burden, but someone worth fighting for. Her lips trembled, her eyes wide with shock. For a moment, hope flickered inside her like the faintest flame. Then footsteps shattered the stillness, torches flared at the mouth of the chamber. Voices rose cruel and mocking. The hunters filled the entrance, promising chains and cages. They spat at they would bleed her dry for the jewels she carried. Their laughter cut the stone like knives. They shouted the human could leave, but if he resisted, he would die screaming. Mark stepped forward, his body tight with rage. His voice rang fierce and clear. He told them they would not take her. He told them she was not theirs to own. The hunters sneered and mocked him, calling him fool. They raised their weapons and advanced. Mark knew this was the moment. Surrender and live, or fight and fall. He turned once more to her, her eyes wide with tears but glowing with trust. She whispered his name soft and broken, carrying all her hope in that single sound. Mark gave a faint smile and whispered that no matter what happened, she must remember this truth. She was free. Then he turned back to face them. The battle came swift. Hunters rushed with steel flashing. Mark swung his branch, striking one down before it splintered in his hands. He snatched a stone and hurled it with fury, dropping another. But there were too many. They swarmed. Blades cut the air, fists slammed into his ribs. He fell to his knees, blood on his lip, his strength fading. The girl screamed her cry, shaking the chamber. She raised her hands and the buried jewels awoke. Light burst from the stone floor, blinding white fire tearing across the cavern. Hunters reeled, clutching their eyes. Mark staggered to his feet, gasping for breath. She shouted words in her tongue and the jewels blazed like suns. The cave roared alive with storm. Mark seized the moment. He hurled himself forward, tackling one hunter, ripping his weapon free. He swung with wild, desperate force, striking again and again. Hunters cursed, stumbling in the glare. The girl stood tall, her body trembling with power, the jewels pulsing like a heartbeat of the world. Her glow filled the cavern, turning night into fire. The hunters raged, calling her monster, calling her curse. But still they pressed forward, greedy hands reaching. Mark planted himself before her, his body bruised but unbroken. His roar thundered through the stone. They would never have her. He fought with every breath, every strike, not for riches, but for her life, for freedom, for defiance. One by one the hunters faltered, their greed shattered against the will of one man who refused to surrender. The leader stumbled to the floor, broken. His mask cracked, his eyes wide with disbelief. He gasped. No human should fight for an alien. He spat. She was nothing but a jewel bearer. Mark pressed the weapon to his chest, his voice steady like fire. He told him she was not treasure, she was not curse, she was life and she was free. The leader's eyes filled with fear. His men scattered into the forest, their torches dying in the dark. Silence fell at last. The jewels dimmed to a faint glow. Mark dropped the weapon, swaying near collapse. The girl caught him, her tears falling onto his skin. She whispered he had saved her. Mark's faint smile broke through blood and pain. He whispered she had saved herself. They sat together beneath the broken roof. Moonlight spilled across the jewels scattered around them. She whispered she no longer wished to run, no longer wished to hide. She wanted to see the stars, to live free, to be herself, not a curse. Mark nodded, his voice low and steady. Wherever she went, he would walk with her. Together they would find a life beyond chains and fear. The night stretched, but the fear had lifted. Hope had taken root. She rested her head upon his shoulder, her breath slow, her eyes closing as the weight she carried eased. She whispered softly that maybe jewels were not her true treasure. Maybe her treasure was the courage and trust she had found in him. Mark wrapped his arm around her, keeping watch as dawn painted the sky with gold. They stepped out together into the wild, their shadows long but their steps steady, no longer hunted, no longer alone. The end. Enjoyed the story? Like it and subscribe for more.